Hey y'all, welcome back to another video on Luderco Arms. So in the earlier video we talked about how a water heater works, and I said I'll show you how you can hook two water heaters together if you need to increase your capacity but you're in a situation where you can't put in a larger water heater. So obviously the best solution if you need more hot water than your water heater puts out is to install a larger water heater. That could be taller or wider, but you might find yourself in a situation like I find myself in. So my house was built back in the 60s, and the access to the crawl space is this little small wood door. And so because of the size of this door, a regular sized around water heater will just slide through there, and you cannot get one of the wider, the bigger around water heaters will not fit through here. And because I don't want to knock blocks out of my wall, I'm limited to the standard size around water heater. And then the second problem is this crawl space. If you look right here, this is a 38-gallon water heater, and there's not enough room to put a taller water heater. You can't fit a 75 or 100-gallon water heater in here because there's not enough room above it to fit it. So the only solution was to have two water heaters. So if you have two water heaters, you would have to have an extra electrical hookup for that. Now, being again that this house is old, I don't have that option without doing a whole bunch of additional work. So these two water heaters are hooked up in a series, and we'll go inside on the whiteboard and I will show you how that works. So let's go back inside and I'll be right back. All right, if you're going to hook two water heaters together, the first thing you got to deal with is plumbing, and the second thing you'll have to deal with is electrical. So I'm going to show you how to do this without having to add a second electrical circuit in your breaker box and running wire all the way down for a second 220 single phase line. I'm going to show you how to do it all on the same line. So the first thing is going to be your plumbing. So you've got one water heater already hooked up, cold water coming in, hot water going out to the house. So this is what you got to do. You get a second water heater, put it right next to your first one, like so. Where your hot water is coming out of your current water heater, you're going to want to disconnect that from the house and run that into the cold water inlet of your second water heater, like so. And then your hot water outlet of the second water heater will come out, and now this will go to the house. So now you got cold water coming in to the first water heater, hot water coming out, going into the second water heater, hot water coming out of the second water heater going into the house. So that's the plumbing. Now the electrical will end up being the opposite. Okay, so while we're looking at this, we're going to call this water heater number 1. And we're going to call this water heater number 2. Right? So when we do the electrical is going to be the exact opposite. Where the incoming water comes into this water heater, The incoming electrical will start here at water heater number 2, the one that feeds into the house. If you watched my other video about how a water heater works, then you'll know that you want the cycle to start here, because this is where your hot water goes into the house. So let me redraw this for the electrical to show you what you got to do there, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I showed you the plumbing to connect 2 water heaters in series, and now I'll show you the wiring to connect both water heaters in series to the same 30 amp breaker. That way you don't have to run new electricity. Now ideally it would be great if you've got room in your breaker box, you could put another breaker and wire to it, and that way both water heaters can be on at the same time. But if you don't have that option, you can do it with just one, but this is what you've got to do. First, make sure that you turn off the breaker so that there's no power at the water heaters. Very important. Anytime you're going to work on the electrical, you turn off the breaker. Anytime you're going to work on the plumbing, you cut off the water and the electrical. The reason being is if you drain the tank while you're working on the plumbing and leave the electrical hooked up, it's going to run the thermostat's going to try to turn that element on, and it's going to burn it up, and you'll be replacing the element. So very important. Always turn off the electricity and the water. So on to the electrical. So these are set up the same as they were in my last drawing, where water heater number 1, water heater number 2. So the cold water comes into water heater number 1. It sends out hot water to water heater number 2, which sends out hot water to the house. Okay? Your electrical comes in. You've got 220 single phase, so you got 2 hots, and you got a ground wire. The ground wire will go to each of the water heaters, splitting off into 2. Take your single ground wire and split it into 2, run it to each water heater. Okay, I'm going to erase the ground wire right now just to get it out of the way, but you need to run that ground wire. Okay, so in order to make this work, what you've got to do is replace this bottom thermostat in the water heater closest to the water heater that feeds the house, the one that's hooked to the hot water side of the house. You need to take this bottom thermostat, the small thermostat, out and replace it with an upper thermostat. Let me show you what I'm talking about, the difference. So your upper thermostat, which would be up here at the top, has a thermostat and a relay. Your lower, the small one, which is down here at the bottom opening, is just a thermostat. Turns on and off. So what we've got to do to make this work and power both of these water heaters off of the same circuit is to take this bottom on the water heater that the wire comes into, that's closest where the hot water goes to the house. Take this bottom one out and replace it with one of these top ones. So let's erase this. And this will get replaced with the top style. Like so. Okay? Now once you've got that in there, and it will install exactly where it will install, either one of them will fit. If you unscrew this one, you see the bolts line up. So either one will fit. So you put your top one in there like I've got drawn now, and then hold on a second. Let me consult something real quick. So now this wire will come down to here and will go out to here. So this wire will, the two wires that were still on there will hook up there and there, just like that. And then you will have to add a wire, 10 gauge wire, to this terminal here, this middle terminal, and you'll bring it out and run it over to your second water heater right here. And then you'll take this wire right here and add a wire, cut it, and then hook a second wire and run it right there. Just like that. So now both of the water heaters are hooked up in series. So let me draw the tanks on, and I'll try to explain how this is going to work for you. So let's say this is your tank here, and you got your tank here. So your cold water is going to come into the bottom of this tank, and hot water is going to come out the top, and it's going to go over to this tank and to the house. So how does the cycle work? Let's say both tanks are filled with cold water. You turn on, you get all your wiring and plumbing done. Turn on your water, fill both tanks up, open the faucets in the house, let all the air out so there's no air in the tanks. And you're sitting there with two water heaters full of cold water. So you turn your power on, and your power comes down to here, this very first set. And so the thermostat set to 120, and power will go to this heating element and warm the water in the top of this tank to 120 degrees. Once it reaches 120 degrees, this relay will kick, and it will send power down to here. And this relay and thermostat unit will start heating this element up to 120 degrees. Now once it reaches 120 degrees, all the water in this tank is 120 degrees. So this thermostat will say it's at the temperature, and it will kick this relay off. And when that relay kicks off, it will send the power up to water heater number 2. This thermostat will turn this heating element on, heat the water in the top of tank number 1 up to 120 degrees. Upon reaching 120 degrees, the thermostat will kick the relay. The relay will send the power down to this thermostat, and this thermostat will turn this heating element on till it reaches 120 degrees. The entire tank is now 120 degrees, and it shuts off. So now you got 2 full tanks of hot water sitting there waiting for somebody to start using the hot water. So now once somebody starts using hot water, right, hot water is coming out of this tank at the top. Hot water is coming from the number 1 tank into the bottom of this tank. And cold water is coming into the bottom of the number 1 tank as the hot water is being used out of the number 2 tank. And as the cold water comes up, once it reaches this area and this thermostat drops down below its temperature, this will turn back on and start heating this element again. And as you continue showering and this cold water continues rising in this tank, it will get up to this thermostat, and this thermostat will say, hey, now I'm cold. So it will kick this relay, which will turn off power to this thermostat and element at the bottom and turn on this element at the top. And it will start trying to heat its water up. But as you continue taking a shower, that cold water will make it to the top of the tank and over to the bottom of tank number 2. And as it starts filling tank number 2, this thermostat is going to kick. It's going to cut the power to tank number 1 and turn this heating element on. That heating element's going to start trying to warm to 120. But as the cold water, the hot water continues to be used and the cold water continues to rise in this tank, it's going to get to this thermostat. This thermostat's going to say, oh, I got to start heating up. So it's going to kick this relay. It's going to cut power to the bottom one and send power to the top element. And it's going to start trying to heat up. And at this point, you are back to the beginning of the cycle. Both tanks are full of cold water. This element will heat until it reaches 120 degrees. Thermostat will kick the relay off, send power to this element, this relay and thermostat down here, heating this element up. Once it reaches 120 degrees, the thermostat will kick this relay off, send power to tank number 1, upper. This thermostat will turn this element on. It will heat up to 120 degrees. Once it reaches 120 degrees, the relay will kick and send power down to the final thermostat, which will turn on this element until it reaches 120 degrees, at which time it will cut off and both tanks will be full of warm water again. So that is how you can increase your hot water supply without having to run an extra 30 amp circuit down to wherever your hot water heaters are. Now, if you have the room, I would suggest just putting in a bigger water heater. But there are advantages to this system. Number one, obviously, if you don't have the room for a bigger water heater, then, you know, 2 of the size you can fit is better than nothing. One other advantage is I haven't priced them lately, but when I originally did this in my house, it was cheaper to buy the 2 of the 38-gallon water heaters than it was to buy a 100-gallon water heater. So there's that too. But anything, no matter what you do, you need to make sure when you run this wire out, you're going to have to either notch or drill a hole and put a grommet in the cover here for this bottom thermostat and run that wire up to here. And you need to make sure that the wiring is protected. You don't want that wire getting cut. You don't want to cut a rough hole in this cover down here and have that wire rubbing its insulation on there and getting cut through. So that's going to cause you nothing but problems. But that's about it. That is how you can hook 2 water heaters in series on the same 30 amp circuit and have everything work and have plenty of hot water. I've had mine set up like this for probably 12 years now, and I have no problems out of it. It all works, and you know, it's the only way with our crawl space that we could do it. So hopefully this has helped somebody out, or at least you learned something. And appreciate y'all watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Y'all have a good one.